The trip to Poland with Classrooms Without Borders was a deep dive into Holocaust history. So prior to the trip, we had several sessions in which we met with colleagues really from around the United States, many of which were from the Pittsburgh area, since Classrooms Without Borders is located here. Once we arrived in Poland, we were really able to kind of understand and study Polish culture, the country, and specifically, Jewish culture within the country of Poland. And that entailed going to 3 different concentration camps, which was a very emotional experience. Each and every one of those that we traveled to, it was very heavy, but there was so much that we were able to take out of that, learn from it. And it's one of those trips that when you first see it, and it's a commitment and it's a length of time, and I have kids and everybody has families and lives, and you immediately think of, well, I don't know, because I have to do this, I have to do that. But it's like, I'm so happy that I, just seized the opportunity, because it was amazing.
First of all, it was not a vacation. It was very intense. Of course, the topic is very heavy. The topic alone, it very much weighs on your mind. One thing that I've known, because I've been on other educational trips, is that it's always intense because you're trying to see a lot of history and sites in a short amount of time. There were many teachers from all over the United States, primarily Pittsburgh, but we had teachers from Florida, we had teachers from Texas. And then also we took students, high school students from the Pittsburgh area. That was very valuable as well to see it through their perspective. And we also took lay people from the Pittsburgh area and from all over the United States. Classrooms Without Borders, they feel it's important to take a diverse group of people, but when you process hate, the notion of hate, through 80-some people's eyes, and 4 or 5 of them have done this trip 10 times, and they're still so impacted the 10th time that they've done this. And to process this also with so many people with varying religious backgrounds. There are Christians on the trip, there are many Jewish people on the trip, and there are non-denominational people on the trip, and some people who don't practice any religion. And so to see that, I think it really boiled down to, how does mankind process hate? And that was heavy. It was really heavy. Classrooms Without Borders, they did a terrific job of walking us through the Holocaust slowly from the beginning. And then also on those really deep days when we visited death camps, when we walked through actual gas chambers and try to process, how did mankind get there? How did human beings kill other human beings, babies, children, the elderly, the people in our world that are the weakest at times, our children and our elderly? How did human beings kill other human beings? I don't know that any of us can truly process how that happened, how they got to that point, and how they thought it was okay. As a former high school English teacher, I've always been very interested in literature related to the Holocaust, and the history, of course, related and portrayed in that literature. But I think we learned things about the Holocaust that we would not have learned in a textbook or in a piece of literature. I definitely came back changed forever as a human being, not just as an educator, but as a human being.
I've been teaching the Holocaust for so long, I thought that I had quite a background in understanding. When you're teaching certain things, you get it, but then there's certain things you just don't know that you don't understand. And things if you don't know, you don't understand it, how do you Google it? Anybody can go on a tour, anybody can go to Europe, anybody can go to Warsaw. But when you go with Classrooms Without Borders, you're really meeting people. You're really getting, meeting as many people as they can introduce you to really help you make those connections.
It was heart-wrenching. It was heart-wrenching to visit those places and walk through those places and listen and see it through the eyes of somebody who did experience it all. It was gut-wrenching. The atrocities that we thought occurred, that we read about, it was so much more than that. It was so much more than that. The utter devastation, the attempt to eliminate an entire race of people, a group of people, a shared culture, fostering that sense of empathy in all of us. We can, the power of one, each one of us can do better. We can do better. And you can't help but take that back to your classroom and share that with your community of learners, your faculty, you know, my coworkers, my team, all of them.
A lot of the preparation, you know, our pre-seminar meetings, and, you know, I read a number of books and watched some films, like, to kind of mentally prepare myself. And it doesn't mentally prepare you at all. But you need to go. You need to see it, because I feel like I have a renewed gratitude for the life that I have. Because we all have things. Everybody's got their things, and I am so lucky. I have a house, I have a family. I'm married to my best friend, I have 2 beautiful children, I have a job that I love, and I feel so grateful, so much more grateful for that coming back. Because some people don't have that.
The message was out there, you know, as Hitler came into power, and it just didn't happen overnight. As he became the leader, people followed what he said. The campaign that Adolf Hitler launched throughout Germany was unbelievable. And it was in the messages, the advertising, everything, that the Jews were bad, and people started to believe that. And once that became their mindset, there was no turning back from it.
Hostile and dangerous language is one of the things that I try to pay the most attention to. Its role in the Holocaust was huge, because it starts out with a small comment or a word that out of context might not seem like a huge deal. And this is something we talk about as part of our English 10 unit with Overcoming Hate. But it plants the seeds for what's to come. So, you know, slowly dehumanizing an entire group of people seems like a huge feat. But when you start by just making one comment about one person or one family, that language begins to take root and create a basis for something a little bit more serious or something a little bit more elevated. Now, instead of just referring to them a certain way, you're treating them a certain way. Now, instead of just treating them a little bit differently, you're actively doing something to them that is negative. And now, right, every time one thing becomes normalized, it creates space for the next thing. And it all starts with language.
All throughout history, prior to genocides, big genocides that have happened, you see the world leaders of whatever group doesn't like the other group dehumanizing people. The Nazis called the Jewish people rats. And then, you know, trickle down, then there's this genocide. And it's so dangerous for people in power to use this language, especially in such a public platform where there are so many people around, because then the common people are, oh, well, this person, high and mighty person, whatever, is using this language. That's fine. I mean, nobody's stopping them. It's normal. And of course, we'd like to think that that would never happen again. But we see in modern times, unfortunately, human beings attacking other human beings. And we're all human. It's scary that that language is still happening.
When we were in Poland and, you know, we were traveling to the different concentration camps, some of, you know, just the information of things that happened, I didn't fully understand until I went on this trip. You know, you go there and there are displays of items and real artifacts that you see that just make the experience really palpable for you. So you see luggage that people brought and their names carefully written there. You see dishes that women brought, and you think to yourself, like, people thought they were going there and they were going to be able to continue cooking and having meals with their family, and many were killed the moment they got there. and really understanding that many of these were truly death camps, truly extermination camps.
You know, as you read about the Holocaust, you ask questions about just how did this even happen? And how is it that the victims were just led to their slaughter without fights or without aggression? And it hit me there as they're telling the story, our tour guides, and as Howard Chandler, the survivor, is telling the stories, that they thought they were getting a shower because they were coming from the ghetto, they were riding on trains for days, they were hot, they were sweaty, they were dirty. And so as they were selected to go get a shower and delouse, they weren't getting a shower. They stood under these shower heads and gas poured in. And as I stood there looking at these shower heads, I just knew I wouldn't be the same.
I go into this room, and we go to this room to the left, and it's very dark. And in the room, all of a sudden, this music starts, and in this dark room, on the walls, just all these home movies start playing. And you hear laughter, and you hear people talking, and it's old videos and home videos of people that were massacred, Jewish people that were killed. It's like the first time I was just like, wow, like it just hearing the voices and hearing the laughter and seeing the faces of just everybody has home movies, everybody has videos, and it's like these are real people. And not that you didn't know that, but when you look at shoes and crutches and the showers and all of that, you know that those represent people that were murdered and killed. But when you're watching and seeing the videos and stuff, and the biggest takeaway from all of this is, and I know working with Classrooms Without Borders, which is why it's such a wonderful thing, is it's not about the camps and how many were killed and showing dead bodies and understanding death, which is important to understand the history. It's about the people. It's about who and the people that were there and that were now gone, and also who's remained and who's still here, and also people in general, and how we're all people, and that we have to understand the people that were lost, the strength of those people, the people that were there, but also that we are people too, and that it can happen to us. And as a community, we have to make sure that they're not forgotten, but also that we support them who's here today, and that we learn and we don't do any of this again.
When we were in a museum in Poland, our tour guide said, you know, how important it was to not dwell on the loss, right? The loss is huge. The loss is what we remember when we think about the Holocaust, right? Over 6 million Jews were lost. But he said it's not fair to define a people by their end, because they existed before that, they exist after that. To only remember them and only define them by their darkest moment isn't fair to them.
Stories aren't always told, right? We have these mass graves. And then, you know, at Auschwitz, there's the Book of Names. And you just look through the pages and there's just a room full of enormous books with small little names printed. And it's like every name has a story. And I think sometimes, although I don't teach high school history, one of the important things that we took out of this was, so often when we're teaching about the Holocaust, we teach, you know, the big idea of the Holocaust, but there's real power to personal narratives. There's real power to honoring that this wasn't just a death, this was a life. And what did this person do? And who was their family? And, you know, what was their occupation? And you look at some of these pictures of people who were killed, and you just think about what their future would have brought and all the change and the difference that they could have made. And
one of the other takeaways that I had, which was surprising to me, was this idea of the bystander. You hear often, and I had always heard of the term bystander as an innocent bystander in a situation. And I truly don't think I'd ever heard of a bystander in any other context. So they're talking about the bystanders to the Holocaust throughout this trip, whether it's, you know, the people who lived by the ghettos or the concentration camps. You know, they knew these things are happening and they didn't do anything. And I just, in my brain, I was like, okay, I needed to look up the definition of a bystander. And a bystander is somebody who is at an event where something not super great is happening. Then there's this social theory called bystander apathy. And it's this social theory of people are less likely to help out a victim if there are other people there. And I'm like thinking about it in my classroom, and you know, we see the things in the hallway, and clearly other people are seeing these things happen in the hallway, and they don't do anything. And that's bystander apathy. I found active bystander, and I think this is a great term. An active bystander is somebody who does something in that moment, instead of being in a passive bystander that is letting it happen. It's somebody who in that moment makes the choice to do something about what's happening. And that stuck with me. There were people during the Holocaust who took in the Jewish people who saved their lives at their own risk. I want to teach my kids, my students, to be active bystanders.
You know, we learned so much about the victims, but I also learned so much more as far as the power of one. The individuals who did stand up and did what they could to help the people of the Holocaust at great risk for their own safety, lives, families, all of it. And they did. There were many. And it was nice to see that humanity does exist and did exist at that time, just not in large enough numbers. You know, but there were people who were making a difference. So I go back to the power of one.
In these movements, it's just the little person doing the best that they can, and that's really important. And that was a big takeaway from this seminar. You know, the Selma March was started by a woman who there was a man that was killed for no reason, and she wanted to do something about it. So this whole Selma March, which we always see Martin Luther King at the start, and we see men at the front, and we see these people's names that we know, but it was really started by a small group of women that we never really hear about. I think students need to understand that, and people need to understand that we can still do great things even if no one knows your name.
We had a survivor, his name is Howard, and he currently lives in Canada, and he was a child when it occurred, but he worked in a labor camp, he worked in a death camp, he was held captive, he traveled with us. That alone was invaluable, and to me, that was hope.
Howard Chandler traveled with us. He's a 95-year-old Holocaust survivor from Auschwitz. With Howard sitting in the exact barracks with Howard where he was held prisoner at Auschwitz-Birkenau, and listening to him tell the story of what day by day was. It was his resilience that just was so inspiring, so powerful, that message that he sent. It really gave everybody hope when we look around the world today and what goes on and the hate that's out there. Until he has no hate. He just is an amazing individual, and he has dedicated his lifetime to sharing his story with people. And I'm very fortunate to have been one of those people to experience that.
I had the opportunity to ask him if there was one thing, you know, that you would want my students to know, what would that be? And he said, to be kind to each other. That there's no room in this world for hate. And if a man who went through all this terrible, evil, awful, and is still this beautiful person says that, we have no excuse. We have to, because I believe, luckily, all of us haven't gone through any of that level of terrible. We have to, if he can continue to be loving and kind, we can too.
When the Tree of Life shooting occurred, I was in shock, as I think many Pittsburghers were, regardless of your religion. You know, anytime a shooting occurs, we're in shock. We're in disbelief. But learning about the Holocaust and learning how hate starts small and then it grows big to where the brainwashing, the lies, you know, the feeding of hate, I'm not surprised. I'm saddened. I'm disappointed. But I have a piece to play in that. I can't control other people. I can only control me. And unless I'm going to share what I learned there, and unless I am committed to learning more about history and even the ugly parts of history, that I'm committed to facing that ugly part and talking about it with others in a way that we can have civil discourse. We might disagree, but can we have discourse about this and not avoid it? And so, after seeing the hate that I saw, I'm not surprised, and I think history will repeat itself unless we have difficult discussions about hate, unless we want to be better ourselves in the little stuff. You know, we say, well, we would never do that. Well, I bet a lot of people said they would never do that during the Holocaust. It is not acceptable to be a bystander because the Holocaust didn't start by, it didn't start with gas chambers on day one. That my takeaway was that hate starts small. Hate starts with talking about a colleague at work. Hate starts with being upset with one of our neighbors in our community because they're not like us, or they don't think like us, or they don't behave the way we do. Hate starts that I'm going to judge you because you're a different religion than me, or you have a different political affiliation than me. Hate starts small, but it can grow quickly.
There's a quote that Howard said, "Don't be indifferent to what's going on around you. Stand up. Sometimes you get a bloody nose, but it's worth it." And, hearing him say, like, you have to stand up. Don't just stand by and let these things happen.
I think it's, as Howard said many times, it's continuing to share that story, because once you know the details, you can never unknow it again. It happened, and there's still deniers out there today, which really surprised me. How could you deny that this happened? I mean, history and all the evidence, the actual physical evidence is there. So it's making sure that stories get out and continue to get out. One of the things that I think about all the time is, as I'm teaching 6th grade students, I have 11 and 12-year-olds. They will never have that opportunity to talk with a Holocaust survivor, because as we've gone through history, we've reached the point where they're very few and far between. And it's up to us now to continue to tell that story and make sure that the youth in America understands this did happen and how easily something like that could happen again.
One of the hardest questions for me after this trip was, how was your trip, right? My relatives, my friends, like, how was Poland? They ask it like I went somewhere new and exciting and had this really happy tale to tell. And I can't figure out how to answer that. But what I leave with most would probably be that resolve and that action and the feeling that, okay, I didn't go there and feel sadness for that long for nothing. I have to do something with it now. And I am armed to do something with it now, with the knowledge and with the resources. And although I still haven't figured out how to answer, how was your trip? I know what I want to do about it, which is, spread the word, make my own lessons better, teach better because of it, teach other people, share with my friends, share the books I bought with my friends. I think what I take away is the feeling that I need to take action.
I have to teach my students to do better. I have to teach my own children to do better, because that can't happen to anybody.
I don't think we do enough of this in education, and especially the way Classrooms Without Borders set this up, where we had lay people, we had students, we had educators. I would tell every educator that is listening to this message or that I meet personally that you should go. Don't be afraid. anytime you can travel on an educational seminar, it's vital that we do that. Because how can we teach about World War II? How can we teach about the Holocaust unless we have visited Holocaust sites? How can we teach about different countries? How can we teach about history in the United States unless we have visited sites where historical events have occurred? Any educational seminar, educational trip where you're traveling is of the utmost benefit for you as an educator and for non-educators to understand more about equality, diversity, equity, these topics that take on political kind of pictures and views. And then hearing teachers talk about how they can better incorporate this into the teaching of history.
I left there feeling a sense of I am part of this organization, of this community of really change makers, teachers, educators, people from all over that felt compelled to go on this trip and felt a real sense of urgency in how can we, present day, fight the hatred that was seen during the Holocaust. How can we work so that, like we said, Auschwitz didn't just fall from the sky? How can we work little by little to reverse things that are going on currently like that? Whether it's the way, the speech that we hear, whether it's actions that we see, whether it's things that we notice and before maybe we wouldn't have said anything and now we will because those conversations happened. So I came back really compelled to take all of those tragedies that we learned about and make change.
Without unity, that's why these things happen. And this is how Holocaust, genocide, all of these happen without community and without unity. And, I teach, and we talk about the pyramid of hate. And the pyramid of hate, it builds on itself. And so it starts with jokes and words and hate speech at the bottom. And if the community allows that, and if the community says that's okay, then on top of that, then starts discrimination. And then it becomes violence, and then genocide. So it all works on each other. And if the community allows one thing, and then it continues. And it seems so simple, like, oh, it's just not that simple, but it really is. And so a community has to stop the first thing, or the second thing is allowed to happen. By allowing hate speech, by allowing hate to occur, by allowing a group to be separate, by seeing them as different. That's how it all started. And that's where it has to stop. You can't stop it here. You have to stop it at the bottom. And it seems so simple, but that is really where it begins.
I always tell my students, you are the best person to say to your friend, oh, I don't know if you should have said that, right? They're gonna hear it from you differently than they'll hear it from me. So encouraging them to say that to their friends, maybe you feel a little weird about it, but that one moment, if you don't say that, they can take that as I'm allowed to say these things and nobody cares if I say these things, so it's okay. I think the language is really, really important.
Nothing good can come from hate. And even if in that moment we feel better about saying mean words, we feel better for all of 2 minutes, 5 minutes. We're all very different people. And I think we can't all get along all the time. We can try, but we're human beings. And so I don't have any, amazing words of wisdom to make us all get along in any community. But I do think if we're all more aware of our judgmentalness, our defensiveness, and kind of think, where is this coming from? We can be a better community. And I think as teachers, the more we educate ourselves by walking historical sites and seeing history, walking history as much as we can, because there's so much to learn from our past history as a country and as a nation, as a world, as a state of Pennsylvania. And so what is our history in our communities that informs people's decisions? And so I just think overall, if we can be more loving, each one of us has a role to play in calling out hate when we see it. I think we have a duty as educators to be a role model and to model patience, kindness, and that when someone else is in trouble, we help them, regardless of their background, regardless of how different they might be from me, regardless of skin color, politics, religion.
Kids are watching us, you know? We might not realize it, but our youngest learners, our kindergarten students, up to our high school students, they're watching us, you know, and they're seeing our interactions. And kids are so smart, you know, they know your feelings and, you know, that you enjoy being there, that you like being with them. We all know how receptive kids are to that. And so they're getting those internal cues that we're feeding off. They're seeing our interactions with people, and they're oftentimes modeling the way they're interacting with people based on what we're doing. So I think every day as a teacher, you need to see yourself as a leader, because you are.
We can model the appropriate behavior, the empathy, take those teachable moments when in the classroom, when an event happens, when something is said or somebody is mistreated in some way. We have to stop and we have to explain the importance of it. And I think we need to do a better job celebrating the diversity in our buildings, the different cultures, the different ethnic groups, embracing that all and teaching our students that we are rich in history. Let's take away something from all of that. And I think we have that voice. Again, as educators, it's up to us to model that behavior and take those moments. And it's, as a community member, you need to do the same thing.
Howard, someone asked him, why teachers? Why are we your target audience? Why have you partnered with Classrooms Without Borders? I mean, you could go and discuss the Holocaust with anyone, your experiences, your life. Why teachers? Because that's really where he devotes his time and energy. And he said, as teachers, you have such an important job to repair an imperfect world. And I thought, he's right. That is our obligation, you know, every day with the students that we work with the families that we work with, the interactions, the little things that we say, that we do, the nuances, being able to teach kindness and empathy. Kids are never too young to start learning kindness and acceptance.
I think a community is a group of people that they take you in no matter what. They accept you no matter your differences, race, religion, anything, because we're all human, we're all people, we all deserve to have a place and to be loved. And I think that has to start with us, or maybe not start with us, but continue with us in our classrooms. I think so much hate comes from ignorance and fear. So how do you fix ignorance and fear? Knowledge. They need to know, they need to learn about the differences and what makes all of us different and beautiful. And, you know, I think we create this safe space in our classrooms so that kids can feel comfortable to share their differences and what makes them special. I'm Peruvian, and I love talking to my students about, like, oh, hey, well, this is something that goes along with this, and this is something that I did while I was growing up, and something that my dad taught me, you know, because he's from Peru. And I'd love to see us have a community where the kids say, well, I'm this, can I tell you about this? And wanting to hear those differences, not just, it's weird, you know, it's, well, no, that's what makes them special, or that's what makes me special. This is what makes me special, and I want to share it with you because it's important to me. And so we share, and they have that knowledge, and it's this culture of acceptance, and there isn't anything to be afraid of. It's beautiful, it's cool. Why not celebrate these differences? Because if everybody was the same, it'd be boring. Life would be so much more dull without the colorfulness of humanity.
A community united is probably the most powerful thing that we can have, right? We know that as individual change makers, we have a lot of power. Together, we're unstoppable, right? Howard constantly told us on our trip, remember, no one is above you, no one is below you. And it sounds so simple, but I think about it every day. I think about it for myself when I go into a setting where I might feel insecure or nervous. I think about it in all of my interactions with others. So if as a community we can all embrace that, and especially when we're talking about embracing diversity and learning about cultures and having some of those difficult conversations. So there are painful parts of history that we have to think about, we have to talk about, because we don't want them to ever be repeated. And we want to make sure that, we are continuing to make those little choices day in, day out that are going to lead to positive change. So as a community, we can definitely do that.